child protection is such a critical sector within the work that I do, and a vulnerable sector that you can't afford to operate on autopilot. You have to be conscious and you have to be present and you have to be intentional.
It is an actual responsibility and obligation for all of us to actually pause and ask the questions that you actually ask of yourself. And that was, what am I actually avoiding?
We've always been reactive to situations and outcry, but we're not sitting with the incident, looking at what happened and what are we wanting to happen, what was the outcome, and then developing a system around that.
Being human, being kind, being compassionate, turning up despite actually knowing that you are at risk, because your intention is to actually show somebody else that you see something else in them than what everybody else has seen is far more important.
So the reason I can fight as hard as I do for as long as I do is because I've sat with them and I can feel their pain and it's real.
This is Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. I'm Cathy Dimarchos. Let's explore what it means to lead, live, and listen with intention.
Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Pay Attention. Today's guest is somebody that you will definitely love. Her conviction and her passion for the work that she does goes far beyond any sort of title. So let me actually just get straight into this and introduce you to Nicole Hague. Nicole is a deeply conscious advocate for children and young people. She's committed to creating systems that honour safety, dignity and belonging. As a Director of Progressive Youth Care, she works at the intersection of law, policy, community and lived experience to promote the rights, well-being and the protection of every child. Guided by a belief that all children deserve to actually grow up feeling safe, supported and genuinely seen. Nicole actually leads with humanity, courage and care. She's known for her passion, integrity and ability to bring diverse stakeholders together, bridging gaps between systems and people, and creating meaningful, collaborative change. At the heart of her work, she is deeply committed to, I'm going to say, not only the work that she does, but to the communities that she actually operates within. She looks at how you can better connect people, and she does that with conscious leadership. She advocates not just for better systems, but for a more compassionate way of working, one that actually centres young people, honours their voices and builds environments where they can actually truly thrive. Now, at the moment, there is an enormous amount of work that's actually gone into the, I'm going to say, sector. There is a reform that's actually in place. And I can tell you that where Nicole actually comes from is purely from her heart. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you for actually joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Cathy. That's big. Thank you. Listening to how you explain me, you go, wow, that's lovely. Thank you.
And you are all of that. That's, if anybody actually knows me, they know that I'm a no fluff person.
Thanks. Until you hear it from someone else, I guess you just sort of don't realise the impact or your presence and how other people see that unless you have a look at that. So thank you for that. They were lovely.
You're welcome. Nicole, I mentioned in there that you operate from a conscious leadership perspective and you do sit at the intersection of, I'm going to say, quite a huge area. It is quite unique and diverse, particularly with your skill set and where you are able to see things because you have the benefit of actually seeing things at what I would call grassroots, so frontline, but also actually having that depth of knowledge around policy and then having the ability to, I guess, bring those stakeholders together to actually have a better lens. So given your experience and your exposure, where do you actually see that, I'm going to say, embedding of conscious leadership throughout the system, throughout the department, in everything that we do, really come to the forefront?
Okay. I think for me, consciousness shows up in lots of ways, and in both within my professional life, but it's also within my personal life as well. I think it's about, for me, I choose to be present with people, and in the sector that I work with, it's in moments likely under huge pressure, crisis, that are in trauma. So it's normally people at their worst and at their deepest and darkest points in life. So for me, leadership is about having presence and making sure that my intentionality is present when I'm there, making sure that I bring that to the table in those moments. It's a foundation, I guess, on how I also live, not just how I lead. I think it works for me within my life. It is, child protection is such a critical, sector within the work that I do, and a vulnerable sector that you can't afford to operate on autopilot. You have to be conscious, and you have to be present, and you have to be intentional as to what you're bringing to the sector with your presence. So showing up for my team and my people when we serve, our community, for me, is about having an open heart. It's about actually listening to what isn't being said and choosing, empathy over the red tape and the bureaucracy that can go on within the public sector and the governance. It's, recognising that every system that we build and every decision that we make has a human effect, has a ripple. It comes down. I mean, showing up and raising those conversations in a manner that be delivered, that can be received, I said. So kindness, having it heard for the intention that it's meant to be. So, I think it's presence and intentionality for me.
It's interesting, I think, because, you are actually operating, most organisations actually operate within a system. I guess the system that you're operating in is, I'm going to say, mammoth, because there are so many different departments and so many different legislations that you need to actually, abide or conform to. And it's not always obvious for those that are making the decisions to be fully aware of what is actually happening, on the front line, on the ground. So, Nikki, to be able to genuinely sit in a position, of bringing the right people to the table, how do we actually do that? What will it actually take? Because here's where I actually see the issue being. Everybody has a job to do, and there is an enormous amount of fear that actually exists at every single level for people to actually maintain their role for security, fiscal, personal. And so actually asking different questions or passing information on is always a challenge. What do we do in these situations? What is your experience?
Again, I think it's coming back in, working from, unless it's not a very professional term, it's working from our heart, from our core, working from the human element more so than the business element, particularly in the sector that I work in, Cathy. It's making sure our decision-making is done with fairness, integrity and compassion. These are all things that need to be put forward in the development of those systems as well, where as humans we don't fit into one box. So accountability. But I think more than anything, given the system and the size of the system and the sector being a public sector, it takes courage. One, because we are dealing with generational trauma. We are dealing not just within our young people, but within society and where we've come from and our political moves, our programming. All of this has been developed based on previous traumas, developments or societal incidences that have dictated how we have gone. We've always been reactive to situations and outcry, but we're not sitting with the incident, looking at what happened and what were we wanting to happen, what was the outcome, and then developing a system around that. For the most part, I think it's reactive and responsive to public pressure, to the outcries, to the noise. But we need to sit sometimes and be quiet and actually look at how we can bring this forward and receive the outcome that we want. And I think that will happen, but we need to do that. And that's about that presence and understanding the intentional reason why we sit in these spaces. So it's about social justice. For me, it's about, the belief in every person, and particularly for me, it's about belief in every young person that's experiencing exclusion and hardship. These are all things that deserve to be acknowledged. And these young people and their families, they deserve to feel valued, respected and seen. And it makes it really hard to do that when everything comes down to, in real time, dollar accountability without the understanding of the impact that those limitations or measures put on such a system.
Look, I guess the fiscal responsibility is always at top of mind, and I know that you're incredibly conscious around that. But at times, actually understanding where do we actually prioritise a fiscal responsibility over a human rights, situation, and also safety. And I think that's one thing that is always actually overlooked. The decisions that we make sometimes actually put our people at risk. Not just the young person, but our people at risk too. Can you actually share some insight around that and what you actually see?
Yeah, I think decisions that are being made, there's a disconnect, like I said, from the people that are making and developing our systems to the realities of what we face on the ground. There's a taught or a lectured understanding or a read understanding of what trauma is and what the community is feeling, which is why I choose to be in and amongst it, because it keeps it real. I then feel. So the reason I guess I can fight as hard as I do for as long as I do is because I've sat with them and I can feel their pain, and it's real. It's not a system and it's not a policy. It's not a process. It's not something that we can write to. So I think for me, they need to get on the ground. They need to be practical. They need to understand. We can all be learned. But have we lived the experience? Have we felt the experience? And doing that alone will bring a lot more, realism to what is actually happening out there. And the battles that our families and our communities are going through, they're real. And we don't all respond appropriately, but we do need to be able to sit in that calm and be able to come to the table with support that's genuine and authentic, not tokenistic and tick boxy. Yeah.
You mentioned before that, a lot of the decisions are actually made in a reactive way, and I can understand that because most of the time it's a crisis. The situation is actually critical and it needs a response immediately.
Yep.
The solution, though, Nikki, isn't necessarily about that particular incident. And I guess being, in a political realm, because this is government funding, decisions are actually made based on the budget of, the sitting government most of the time. Being able to look at prevention, what does that look like?
Gosh, and that can vary. That's a big one because that can vary depending. As humans, we all deal with things very differently, and we're all capable of managing things when given the safe space to do that in varying ways. So what necessarily is right for me in that moment to address with something is not necessarily going to be right for you. And that needs to be acknowledged and identified and accepted. Trying to make everyone fit into that one box or that one process or that one system is never going to work. And we're going to see people walk away halfway through a process unfinished and in many cases more broken. So I guess I watch a lot of deeply traumatized young people. Finally, for me, it's about creating a space where they can finally come and feel safe enough to let that guard down. I'm watching my team step up and advocate for that space and to be trusted and backed. I need to back that with them to be able to create that. But I think they're looking at one size fits all, and it's never going to be the case. It's not that simple. But if we look at it from a human element and from a point of empathy and on the ground reality, people connect better when we're here, not sending them a letter in the mail advising them of our rights. So I think feeling it, and I think the shift that I've, seen in working with the complex people and what real change requires, it's not always immediate, it's not always visible, and it's not always something that we can measure. to put into our stats and our reports to validate our accounts. And sometimes it's a long haul process. So it's having looking at that helicopter view at the big picture, not just this one sector, because they move on as adults. And whether they move on as functional adults or dysfunctional adults is largely led by the care and support that they get as young people in these moments in the sector that I sit in. So we do it right now. Long-term benefit is going to create a society and a community of people that are functioning in a much healthier manner than continuing to support or add to generational trauma. And that is what I see. We just move from system to system. As we age out, that number shouldn't be the trigger. And I think that is, we need to look at the bigger picture and the long-term impact. Nothing is ever going to be fixed over a 2-year term. So we need to have a look at that continuation, in everything we do. How do we support at the end of this phase and what do we gain by that? But the challenge is learning not to carry everyone, they're not alone, like letting them know that they're not going to have to do this. So for me, I think my leadership requires me to be really aware, self-awareness of my boundaries and my reflections and also having enough humility amongst our leadership to be open to learning. I find a lot of people, it's really hard to educate someone that knows it all. And, I love learning and I think I learn every day and every hour and I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that I have people come into my life that can bring further wisdom in an extremely frustrating position. But I think timing and energy, being comfortable and sitting in the discomfort, creating spaces that are safe for people to speak without hierarchical retaliation. These are all things that are going to bring forward a sector because they're currently things that shut down the sector. They're the roadblocks that prevent us from providing a service that is humble but works with humanity and empathy and is steadfast, like we're here to do a job and we need to finish that job, and it shouldn't be conditional to the buck or conditional to, the bucket's run out. It's just not how life works. So I think a realistic expectation, understanding the emotional weight that people are carrying out there at the moment, the challenges that they're learning to live by. These are all, I guess, angles leadership needs to be looking at when they're leading, if they're going to truly lead people. We can all dictate, but leadership is about walking with people and having them want to walk with you. And you're not going to have that when you're dictating something that is not practical, not realistic, not authentic and not genuine. It's fiscal, and that's currently my frustration within the sector at the moment.
You raised a really important point there in respect to the transitioning piece, and I don't think that is often considered. And so when they're actually doing any sort of data or research, collection, they're looking at such a small time span in what they're actually aiming to achieve. But if we look at the longevity of particularly the type of work that Progressive does and the prevention that it actually, has been able to bring, I'm going to say to the forefront of both that young person, the actual safety of its staff, the community, that's not measured. And yet that is the most important aspect.
Yep. And it is frustrating because it's that tick box system that we've seemed to have developed, and automation and workflow is great, when we're looking at technological side of things, but we're looking at humans, particularly, young humans that are going to be our future. These are what's going to be running our future. So it's looking at, I try and work with what do I know and how do I feel in the moment. So I sit in those spaces. When I'm uncomfortable, what am I avoiding? Why do I not? I try and really ask myself that first. Then when I make a decision, I try and look at who will be impacted by my decisions and what that impact would be, or what I hope that impact would be. What would I choose if I was guided by wisdom and courage? It's intuition is not professional in a government sector, definitely not. But intuition's not about ignoring evidence. So I think it's understanding the human element of our work, not just the systemical element of the work or the processes. So it means listening deeply. It means, hearing enough to be able to include the information that we can't always capture on paper or within a system. It's consciousness, just being conscious in our ongoing practice, aligning our actions with the awareness of what we're trying to achieve. It's choosing to lead from purpose, not ego, which is a big issue in our hierarchical structure here. And I was talking to my team yesterday and we spoke about leading from responsibility, not fear. Sometimes that's a tough one because responsibility is breached every day and not met every day. And it's fear that is the blocker of us doing what we know is right. So learning that belief that people are capable of change, when we are given the right supports, anyone can do anything. There's no special trick to being successful if you're given the right supports. And that shouldn't be a luxury or dependent on a birthright or a demographic. That should be a right for every human, regardless of where we live. So it's about leading and getting our systems to address that. Just looking beneath the surface, I think, Cathy, it's all about that energy and timing.
You raised now a couple of times, it's not professional. And it's interesting because one of my other guests who actually sits within the legal sector, shared something similar in respect to, if I had said this, a few years ago, people would have thought differently, of me. Here's the thing that's really critical. Whilst you say it's not professional, it is an actual responsibility and obligation for all of us to actually pause and ask the questions that you actually ask of yourself, which you raised, and that was, what am I actually avoiding?
Yep.
Because the second that you actually pause long enough to say, what am I avoiding and why am I actually feeling like this or why am I actually reacting like this, allows you to then genuinely think about where that bias might be coming from and what is actually preventing you from actually looking at an alternative solution. And so it's not actually about not being professional. That's what professionalism actually requires of us. So I just wanted to actually bring that back because it is such a valid point. And if anybody is actually listening to this and thinking that, no, you don't question yourself, well, you're in the wrong job. No matter what job you're doing, you're in the wrong job. And then the other thing that you just mentioned was intuition. Well, there's actually science that proves that intuition actually is, a strength, and it is fact-based because our intuition is actually guided by our past experiences and actually can tell us exactly what is going on, but we've learned to actually ignore it.
And logic is always favoured over intuition, and particularly in a public space or a public sector space. And so it's how you deliver that intuition is, I guess, for me, a challenge. I would say logic is important, but it's not the whole picture. Logic can help us assess risk and structure, and our thinking, it can help us come up with plans and make sense of facts. But intuition, as humans, intuition often tells us what is happening beneath and what is driving the situation that we're currently in. It notices the tone, that's intuition. There's no system that can detect that. There's no system that can pick up on timing and energy and the discomfort and possibilities that are out there because it's predetermined by the system what the outcome should be. And that is the biggest failure of it all because destiny is each individual's rights, and it's not written by a system. It's written by the supports and the guidance of the paths we walk. So I think best decisions often come when we allow both logic and intuition to inform us. Yeah.
I've often actually said, I guess people that know me, particularly through my history, have actually said I'm very analytical and very strategic, and I am that. But the reality, is that every decision that I make is intuitive first, and I use the analytical element to minimize risk. And so, when I'm sitting in any sort of a boardroom or in any situation, it is my gut feeling that actually comes first. That's actually, and all of us actually have that, by the way. I'm not special. It's just that I listen to it. It's our nervous system, and our nervous system actually does most of the actual, I'm going to say, work, as opposed to what science has been, shared with us, in that our brain does the work. It's not. The nervous system actually feeds the brain. And so, Nikki, when you actually say intuitively, I just know, well, that's because your body has actually learnt to respond in its natural state.
Yes, I agree. I think we need to reframe. If intuition or the word intuition makes people uncomfortable, I think we need to reframe what intuition is, because they all write it off as a mystical, fragile thing, a voodoo, a spiritual whatever. For me, it's a subconscious mind. And it's synthesizing decades of what I've experienced in my life. It's recognizing patterns. It's, deep emotional intelligence. So connecting those feelings with the information that we're presented with and acknowledging what we're experiencing in them. It's processing data, in a way that's different to a system that will be measured by a systemic. So trusting our guts in yours and my practice generally would be a valid metric. But in our current systems and the autonomy that we were working with, policies and processes, it doesn't meet complex human environments like intuition does, child safety and team dynamics. People don't live into neat logic and boxes, Cathy, and that's, I think, we fail in developing our policies because there is not one box that's going to fit everyone, and intuition is often accurate as a diagnostic tool. If you're reading the room and sensing the unspoken and knowing when a strategy feels wrong, despite looking perfect on paper, and having the courage to speak up and go raise that conversation, but also hearing those conversations on the other end and allowing that information to be processed, whether you agree with it or not, accepting that information, whilst it may not be your method, it is a method that many rely on. It's survival. We are preached trauma. We are fight and flight. These are all valid theories that have been created, that we've developed our systems on, and yet it's that very theory of empathy, of intuition, love. These are all feelings that are based on human element, and we are taught to be trauma-informed or trauma. These are all feelings. These are not systemic mechanical measures. This is a human reaction. And I think this is the issue that we have, when we abandon our logic for system. It needs both. So, we have to be brave. We have to align our decisions with the paths that we are walking. And, we don't always have to walk blindly.
And that actually leads into courage, which you mentioned again before. And somehow courage actually also then means that we give agency. To your point, not everything is actually going to fit into our box. And so when you're actually looking at systems and policy making, being able to then trust, I'm going to say, the people that we entrust to actually follow through with the policy and give them agency to make the right decisions to serve the people that we're actually there to serve. That's missing at the moment. What will it take?
I think we have to get to a point where we allow. An example yesterday when I was speaking with my team, it was about I asked them to allow intuition to pick the destination. So let intuition pick that destination, so the outcome. And then let logic create the map on how we get there. So it's using both. And it's about you not abandoning our intuition and our logic, and using intuition, to make the brave decisions when the path forward is not, it's blind. We can't see it. We don't know. So sometimes we have to trust that gut, and we have to and I say that every day. I know it sounds crazy and I've got no evidence to prove it. Just trust me. It's annoying. And I think for the most part, I have 200 staff that all have heard that so often now. They know that and they hear that and they accept that. So where before in the beginning, if I was to say that, they would just think, how unprofessional, and where did this woman come from? And wow, like this. But a very large part for our organisation, I'm hearing them repeat the same thing. I'm hearing the words around emotional intelligence, things like, so that it's programming, but it takes time, Cathy. Not even a system is going to bring reform to a sector, a crisis of trauma, of a place of whiteness for humans. There's no system that can fix that. That's time. Time is what they need, and support in that time.
And also the courage to have these types of conversations, Nikki. I think, even for somebody like you and for progressive within the system, you still actually are reliant on, I'm going to say the policies that have been written, the departments that actually uphold the policies, and having the courage to be able to have those conversations, and sometimes they're difficult conversations. They need to be had, but not everybody is like you. So, bringing that sort of a forum together to allow open conversations. What are some of your thoughts around that?
I still sit in forums when my voice shakes. I still stand alone at times when I think, oh, good Lord. But I think for me, it is about, there's clear right and wrong, and I think essentially that is built in all of us. Like, we all know what right and wrong is, and there's being able to say that and say that safely is what we need to be able to say, and being able to say that and say that safely, but have it heard safely as well, because I'm not there to attack you.
Yeah.
But what I am there is to say, hey, is there another way? What can we do? Many minds can create some amazing things. But if we lock 10 people into a room and say, create a system, that's what you're going to get. But if you bring many people together and then you open that up and really be open to feedback, whether it's feedback we like to hear or not, or it's raising issues that are sometimes hard to hear. But when you can hear that, then we have progression. We have an ability to come together and create something. But when we close that off as it's wrong because policy doesn't allow it, or it doesn't work, or the system, the gate's there, it's not unlocked, it can't, then we lock ourselves into that same box as well. And as humans that are working, with humans in distress and trauma, and they're locked, they're surviving, asking them to function while they're trying to survive and keep themselves safe. It is our job to create a system that they can do that in, knowing that they're going to have an end goal, that it is there and they're going to be supported, and they can trust that. But at the moment, if it doesn't tick a box, where the gate doesn't open, they're stuck, and they're stuck for months. And in some cases, they're stuck for years. And we heard that through the commission, and we heard, the human impact that caring can have on people. And I think people do that genuinely and accept that there is a cost, there is a hurt, and we do, but it is through those feelings that we actually drive harder. You can send me a book and go, this is how to cook a cake, but if I want to change it, I should be able to change that. Then our systems have to apply the same way, and we don't have that ability yet or we don't have the right ears hearing us. And it needs to fall on the ears that aren't being attacked. They need to be able to hear this and hear what I say, as it's not but they're very defensive. It's very hard to, and even amongst our own here, hey, I'm not trying to pick at you. I'm just raising, the devil's advocate here. And that's, if you can be open to the potential of listening and going, hey, is what someone's saying correct? Even if, do they have a point? And if they have a point, what can we do with that point? Instead, we shove it into a cupboard and go, no, that's not the way it's done, because that's not how the system. Let's create systems that are flexible. I grew up, and I don't know whether you remember, but we had choose your own adventure books. in school in English where you read a chapter and at the end of each chapter, you could choose 3 options and it would tell you which page to go to.
Huh.
And that should be a system. Like I look at this all the time and go, we need choose your own adventure books. Like, because it gives us choice. It gives us options. And sometimes in moments of darkness and stress and trauma and pressure, and the sector's under pressure at the moment, we don't see choices. We just see we're not allowed. And so we aren't showing possibility.
Yeah.
What we are showing is what we can't do. So let's change that and let's put on the table what we can do, and let's choose our own adventure and allow the choices for the lives and allow those we're discussing people's lives and they're not even in the room. They need to choose their adventure. And given that adventure, if you go A, these are the results, the possibilities. If you go B, these are all so there's many, but the choice at the end of the day has to be theirs.
You raised something there, and it also links into something that you said earlier, that level of awareness, though, Nikki, that you bring to every conversation, to every table, doesn't actually exist. And it actually brings back to mind that we somehow think that whatever we do is something out there. But if we don't have that level of awareness to actually even recognize that question that's, seems like it's a challenge or challenging me isn't a challenge. It's not a personal attack. It's a genuine, I'm asking what else is possible.
Yes.
It doesn't exist to start that conversation. And so, you're highlighting to me, whilst we're talking about policies and systems, the reality is we're talking about people. And we've not really created the space to allow people within the system, within the policy making, to be self-aware, to first actually say or recognise, I'm not being challenged. If I can actually just sit and be curious about what's being asked of me, as opposed to defending, we might be able to get to a different outcome.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I think for the most part, everyone within the realms that I work in are humanitarians. I think they all come to the sector with a genuine, authentic want to help create a better world, a better place. I think the system overtakes them. They become programmed. You're watching a world currently as AI is unfolding and dictating everything. AI is not new. That's system. That's programming. That's information that we've given. That's not all intuition or feeling. So it's about, our systems, AI, none of that can create what you and I can create. When a mother knows her child is hungry, that a system can't detect that. We really underestimate that. So I think really allowing people to feel safe in accepting the fact that sometimes things feel not great, or sometimes it's okay for us to be happy and excited. And when a child gets happy and excited, we all get happy and excited. But we don't allow them to have the sadness or the anger or the frustration. So we're denying that. But we also don't teach each other how to acknowledge our frustrations in a way that's healthy. So I'm often perceived as a frustration when I come at the table. I'm the troublemaker. I'm the one that's just not going to go with the system. I'm going to go against the flow, and here she comes. And it's not genuinely because I want to be difficult. It's genuinely because I realise the impact of the system at the end of the line where I sit, at the bottom with the people that this system's supposed to support, is not practical. And I like to bring, for once, get everyone into the what if. Let's look at what if. What if we get it right? But we're so scared, Cathy, of even attempting to. We don't take a jump because we might fly. If we don't, we land on our feet, but if in the right system, we'll fly. And if in the right system, if we don't fly because we jump too early, which is usually the case for someone like myself, I'm in a system that's supported, so I'll land on my feet and I'll come back and I'll be able to go back again. But it is shut down. It's not the way it's done. You can't do it that way. The system says, and the gates won't open. we are limiting ourselves in the system, within the systems that we created. If we create that, we can create. So being open to the possibilities. But hearing, it's not a fault when someone tells you something that was hard to hear. It's hard to hear because it's hit a nerve. So what has this brought up for you and why? And if that is, I look at something and if that was hard for me to hear, I look at that as a reflection that I need to do some work on myself, or maybe I have been ignorant in the fact and closed off to that. And it's accepting that we all play a role. Yeah. And sometimes I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, and that's okay. That's the human element in what we do, but the systems don't allow for that. And that, I think, is sad, and it's a failing, and I think we're going to continue to make failures when we're relying on a system that we when we were born.
I actually remember working with one of the major institutions, and they were looking at an enhancement. And the biggest issue, and this relates to, similarly to the industry or the sector that you're in, when there is a legacy system in place, we build on top of what is already legacy. What we don't ask is this legacy system the right system to start off with?
Yep. Yeah. No. So
your actual, you go back to, again, curiosity and actually asking, you say, what if? I say, what else? What else is possible? That sort of dialogue often doesn't happen because it's going to actually mean that potentially we have wasted X hundreds of millions of dollars building something, so we've got to keep going. My response is, does that mean that if you have a ladder, and that because it's the only ladder, you climb it? But what happens if you get to the top and you realise you're actually on the wrong building? It's the same thing. So, Nikki, one of the things that I think that you bring to every table is your ability to be able to transcend through, again, I go back to your lived experience from grassroots, understanding the law, because that has been your background, policy, and actually bringing, and I'm going to say key stakeholders together with the ability to actually create the space where everybody is actually heard. Who else do you need at that table with you?
I think it's open ears. It is losing. We need people at the table. We need brave people at the table, and that courage. And we're seeing this particularly in Australia at the moment. We're seeing within our political realm that Australians are clearly speaking, we've had enough of the programming. We've had enough of the public face, promises, and then behind the scenes manipulation to twist that, to meet grounds that are no longer valid or are no longer applicable to what we want. So, and if that's not heard, what we're seeing now just in our political realm, we're losing a structure that we've had back since the 1700s. So we're now looking at that being walked out. So for me, I look at that and go, that is a positive, because I think that is going to bring about change. That, regardless of our political preferences or vote, just that structure itself, that's a solid structure that's been in play and role and believed by, voted by, and since the 1700s, that is the way it's worked. We're now sitting in the 2000s. We're starting to see Australians going, we need real. We want real. I think we need to be real. We need to sit at the table as human beings, not as a structure, not as a system. We need discipline. We need policy, Cathy. We need things to keep, because you'd have people like me that would just run the gauntlet. And you don't give us boundaries, and I'm one of the big ones. I will buy everyone a house if I can. It doesn't matter. That's the way it works, But we do need reality, and we do need to be able to bring it to the table. So I think it's about, like I said, allowing our gut, trusting our gut to bring reason, to bring rationale to some point of an understanding when you've got that lived experience and hearing the people that you have. But I think letting logic map the route, like we do need to have logic and we do need to be practical in order to continue to keep going. We're not always going to be able to work, to everyone's dream framework. But I think the human element is needed in our framework as opposed to the computer element or AI or systemic government approach. It has no business in government. This is not winning votes. This is human lives.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, these people are going to be running our country. And if we don't contribute emotional intelligence and human elements to this, they're going to be another number in a system, and they're going to walk through the world like that, undervalued, undermined, and have no clue of their ability. And there are so many people out there, Cathy, with amazing mindsets and bring magic to the table every day. And I look at that and go, wow, where have you been hiding? But it was because they were given the space to be heard, even if it seems ludicrous. Like, ludicrous is possible. We're in 2026. We can pull off anything we choose to if we're supported to do it. And that, I think we need to stop limiting it to ourselves as humans, our human elements and our governance to systems. And I think that's, moving forward, that's what I'd like to see, having people be able to sit at the table with me, not look at me as a frustration, not look at me as a burden. I'm not here to be painful. I know we're all busy. And I think we start slotting our lives into half-hour and hourly time slots and take the time. And if you haven't got the time, find the time, come down and be real. And if you don't know it, experience it, feel it. And then I think we would have a different mindset.
I think busy, has actually become almost a badge of honour to say that. But to me, that's actually an excuse, and it just means that you're disorganised. But that's another topic. But I do want to come back to who do you actually bring at that table, and you shared something, and maybe the framework is something similar to, from a governance perspective, we need to have a sandbox. So if you have a sandbox and you create the boundaries, and then you ask the question, now what's possible?
Yep.
You actually bring a very different conversation to the table.
Yeah, you're giving them permission. They don't have permission in a system because the system won't go unless you tick a box.
Yeah.
When you step outside that, it's in awe of what we can create when we work together. And when I'm blocked because I'm burdened or tired, or you've got people around you that can step in and add to that if they're given permission, but we're not giving anyone permission. And that's because you're limiting us when we shouldn't be limited. There are so many potentials out there, and there's no right or wrong. Your way is very different to my way, but my way works for me. Your way works for yours. So who's to say that's wrong? If the outcome can be achieved, it's positive, productive, and progressive, then how is that bad? Because it didn't fit in the system.
But it requires courage to be able to trust that will work, as opposed to keeping things in a tight rein and rigid.
Yeah.
And despite actually it failing, people still actually say, no, this is the way we're...
And communication is key to it all. Being open to communication. Look at our Parliament House. I'm embarrassed when I see what I see on TV to think these are our leaders. And I've said it before, when the aliens land and ask me to take them to our leaders, that's not where I'm going, because that to me is not leadership, Cathy. That is a bunch of people just talking over the top of each other, being disrespectful and trying to put on a show for the media and the cameras. That's not real. What's real are the people that are living in the systems that those monkeys are creating. And that is not okay. That's a circus. So I think we need a table with the right people, real people. And I think we need a table where there's no wrong being open to hearing. It doesn't mean it's right. But if we don't jot it all down and look at it all, then we limit ourselves to so much. And just because my views under my spiritual belief are mine. I have people that sit with Catholic views. They're not wrong either. There's hope and faith are such a powerful connector. But we're too busy focused on the difference. No, you're Catholic. No, you're spiritual. Hope and faith is still the same regardless of whose light we shine or which God you're sitting under. It is still the same at the end of the day core element that we all share as human, and that we can connect with. We don't all have to be, it's not black and white. And I don't want the world to be black and white. We need to be different. So we need to be brave to be different, because different means against norm.
And sometimes that means that you're actually standing on an island all by yourself. And yet the one thing that we all want to do is to fit in and to belong, which often compromises the very core of who we actually are.
Yes, because we want to belong. We want to know that we're valued and wanted and needed. That's absolutely what drives us, and it's probably one of my big things, because if I don't, then who will? I'm just as scared as everyone else. I stand up there and shake just like everyone else. I'm also aware that when I walk out of that room, that the doors are going to close and go, wow, what a pain in the arse she is. Make her go away. I guess that for me, I'm driven by that. Their mistake would be make her go away, because that would probably drive me harder. And if you're not going to listen, I'll find someone to listen, and I'll keep talking until someone hears it that can help me or help us, do what we need to do. It's going to create a real difference, not a tokenistic public display for Parliament, not a tokenistic public display to say we're doing right to shut media up. Be transparent, accept the fact that it's not been great. Acknowledge our past, and let's move forward into what we can create.
You said something really important at the beginning, and I think it speaks to what you have just shared, and that was the intention. The intention in which you actually, entertain or step into anything is always actually about the people, the young people, that you're actually there to serve. I think that actually gets missed, especially with policy.
A lot. And you would be surprised it's probably one of my biggest frustrations is when I get an email thanking me for attending or speaking or doing something, but I was emotive in a professional environment. Shame on me. I need to be emotive. That's how we run. We are passionate. Passion drives our courage. It drives fear. Passion to run into a warfield and defend our country. These are all things that have kept us safe. So that's an instinctual thing that we have as humans. Again, there's that word of intuition. Instinctual is another word, that they don't want to play in a realm of professionalism. But until we bring it all back to a human element and allow that and be comfortable with that, then we're going to be continually stuck in a system. So when you watch magistrates that study, that can't make decisions, a discretional decision, why are they sitting there? If a system is dictated, you might as well just push the button and give us a verdict. But we value their wisdom, their experience, their time. Is that not a human element?
Yeah.
So we can run a judicial system of an entire country, or a globe for that matter, based on respect for a role, a learned person that's walked the walk and talked the talk. And we put those people in a position to make decisions that ultimately, dictate someone's life or the outcome of an event. But we're not applying that to our everyday system structures. There has to be a discretional call here.
It's interesting that you raise, the term you were emotive. As I heard you say that, Nikki, it really actually struck a chord with me, because I'm thinking, but we're human beings and emotion is actually part of being human. And so there's almost this incongruency in understanding who we are as people. Why wouldn't you be emotive? It is actually, I'm going to say, ridiculous to think that anybody in any situation is not emotive, because that's what actually drives us.
Yep.
Our subconscious bias into how we want to interpret emotion is really fascinating to me. So that reflection to you is mind-boggling.
Well, for me, that's a reflection of their ignorance, because it is emotive. You sit on the ground and you see a fellow human in despair wanting to help. You watch people turn up every day to help these people, and they get hurt every day, and they turn back up time and time again, and you're watching good people get hurt. I would be concerned if this didn't impact people, and it should impact. Why is sitting in a movie theatre crying over a love story acceptable and not emotive?
Yeah.
But yet in the real world, it's emotive and unacceptable. We can cry in a movie theatre about a fake scene that we've set up, but we're not allowed to do that in realism. So that's not realistic. It's not practical. And it's not fair. It's a denial of what we're doing within our own human rights. It's a denial of it, wanting to keep us all contained in a box of a system that's going to push a button and dictate something that otherwise could be, better played out if we have emotion, because that gives us a responsibility and accountability. And if you are uncomfortable with feeling that, for me, you need to go back and ask why. If you're uncomfortable, there's something there that needs to be addressed. That's wrong. That's genuinely at the core of what goes on there. That's wrong. That's why you're uncomfortable. So if it's wrong, why are you promoting it? Why is it making you uncomfortable, and why promote it? Let's look at making that wrong go away and fixing it. We can't always make it better, but we can acknowledge it and we can go, it's wrong, but this is the best we got at the moment until technology or whatever else it is or we allow comes about. That's acknowledging there's room for growth. We've got room to improve. But in the current environment, the system is it, and it's the be-all and end-all, and the almighty finally dictate. And that, I hate the fact that as humans we're locked into such a conditioned space, because
I'm going to say clinical.
Yes, and given the room to move, we can pull off the impossible. So, and I think that is where they undermine themselves.
I also actually don't think that a lot of people genuinely understand the severity of the situations that, your staff are actually placed in every single day. It is one thing to hear that somebody has been hurt, but it's another thing to actually recognise the severity of what actually happens and the trauma that actually leaves, behind. And often we don't give space for that to actually be heard or discussed. And so, Nikki, I'm aware that, just only recently in the last 24 hours, you've actually had situations arise. And I think it needs to be heard because the magnitude is real. Do you mind actually just giving a very high level, of insight as to, what transpired from a staff perspective?
So to ensure that I don't sort of go in, I'll talk over examples without giving an exact example. Yep. I can give you an example in my situation and in my field, I have youth workers. These are good people. And for the most part, these are people that have turned up because they've had the blessing of having a luxury life. They've had the blessing of having safe parents. They've had the blessing of being given an education, a safe home and a space to be able to grow and develop. They come and want to make those less fortunate, be able to have some of what they were given. So a lot of these guys are not even experienced in a field like domestic violence and things like that, struggle demographic. They're just people wanting to be a good people, as are many of our foster carers. And I know as a foster carer, I started as a single mom, wanting to just show my kids that, there's people out there doing it much harder than we are. I know I'm a tough mom. No, you can't have that today, but let me show you something in the world to remind you of what you do have. So I opened my home up with my children and to show them that we can give, we can help. And in doing that, my trying to, give to the community in need, show my children how we pay life forward and we work together. I expose them to domestic violence. I have never hit my children. They've seen their mother get attacked. They've seen their home trashed nightly. They had police raiding our homes. So the very place they should have been safe become unsafe. I was stabbed in my own kitchen. I have been kidnapped by parents of children as a foster carer. These are all things that foster carers that go through under those immense things. They're impactful. So in trying to help my children understand there's another element of life out there and how we pay it forward, I exposed them to damage. I created, in trying to do the right thing, a neglectful home. And I carry that and I bear that daily, that I perhaps did not make the right decisions in keeping my children safe. And I, walk with that, knowing that I've done that. And I listen to the trauma of foster carers, and you're putting further victims out there. And I wasn't trained. I was a single mum trying to raise. And at the point in time when you throw a teenage that's complex and damaged and trauma and survival mode into a home with a woman that has 3 children that, walks the world of fairies, if you want, lives with intuition and runs by feeling, into a home where all of a sudden it's violence and it's neglect. I wasn't equipped to deal with that, Cathy. I had 3 children. My eldest was at 6. I hadn't even naturally progressed to dealing with a teenage level. But the system doesn't look at any of those things.
Yeah.
So what the system did do then is create further victims. I exposed my children and myself to an environment that I was nowhere near prepared to deal with. Those children that needed help, they needed more than what I could have given them. And intention's great, but it's not always safe. And we need to be able to make sure we do these safe and supported and without guilt. And I look at a system where my youth workers turn up with a 98% chance in our case of being assaulted on every shift. Can you imagine waking up today to go to work at 2:00 this afternoon to take a shift, knowing that you've got a 98% chance of being assaulted? There's no protective gear. There's no tasers. We aren't trained like special forces. Bare minimum, we're good people in gym shirt and sneakers, turning up, trying, and they continue to turn up. So we have had one youth worker by a system required to look after some very complex children, holding boundaries, pushing, and quite often in survival mode. We are tested, and our kids are going to test us. How safe are these people? And if they can't handle me at the worst, they don't deserve me at my best. So I'm going to escalate. I'm going to push my boundaries until I know that you can keep me safe because you're going to hold them. So in holding boundaries, these kids, they fight hard. They attack and they physically assault. But it's not just the on-shift damage that we do. It's the preparation mentally and emotionally to prepare, knowing that you're going into that today. But the benefits outweigh the risk. How can we keep you safe? How can I keep myself safe? And how can I show this young person and their family that I'm here? No matter how bad you got it, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to be strong. And you can beat me up until the cows come home, but I'm not going to be gone. I'm going to stay here. As broken as you've made me, I'm still going to. That's our youth workers, Cathy. That's our sector. And they turn up, they show up, and they keep showing up even when they're broken. And I hate the fact that people are going home to their own families broken. How do their families feel knowing when they leave work today? Is daddy and mum going to come home? Are they safe? They don't get that. So that's the realism of what we deal with. And to do that with forgiveness and to turn back and without judgment, that's next level. That's not professional, that's human. And that's what no system can create. Because if we put that into a system, then we will have work cover going, psychosocial safety. We'll have fair work going, unfair workplace environment. We'll have all of those systemic opposing it, which stops us. That's the blocks, they're the preventions. But when we sit with the what ifs, what if we go in with kindness? What if we go in with forgiveness? What if we go in there and go, no matter how bad you got it, I can still see who you really are and you're worth it. I'm going to be here. We see results. We carry kids longer than, most have not been able to sustain a placement for longer than 4 weeks. We're carrying kids 3 years later still. That's stability, that's structure, that's safe. And that's what a system can't provide. That's provided by humans, and humans that have been broken and battered in that duration of getting to that point. That needs to be considered and that needs to be valued, and credit needs to be given to that. Because at the end of the day, the system is not what's created the realistic environment. It has been the youth workers and the carers and the support teams on the ground that turn up every day regardless.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, you know, I'm very familiar with the work that you do. But hearing you actually just share that again has just reinforced that perhaps we really need to think about what does professionalism mean? Because being human, being kind, being compassionate, turning up despite actually knowing that you are at risk because your intention is to actually show somebody else that you see something else in them than what everybody else has seen is far more important. If that's not professionalism, I actually don't know what it is. And we've really got everything mixed up.
Yeah.
Like, that's just insane.
Yeah, it is. And that's what we need to change until we can come to the table and with our human element and come together. Many great minds will make a massive, they make the magic, Cathy, and that's where it sits. So we need to relook at the table that we sit at. We need to look at the systems, and we need to sit at the table as humans and communicate. But communicate through feeling as well. When someone speaks, I'm okay with you saying, hey, Cathy, when you said that, this actually raised this in me, and I'm curious as to why you said that, or how did you come to that, because I'm trying to understand this from your perspective, because from my perspective, it made me feel very uncomfortable, and I need, offering other ways and other vision is also a way, because sometimes we are programmed to walk down a path and see the tunnel, and that's all we see. But the world's pretty when you look left and right. We're not doing
Yes. Nikki, you've just actually reinforced what a remarkable human being you are and an incredible leader. And, you know, I want to actually commend you genuinely, you know, for your commitment to actually leading the way, you know, in so many ways that most people wouldn't dare actually consider doing. But you've done it actually with grace. You've done it with compassion, with humility. So I'm going to say thank you to you for your continued actual ability to walk this earth as a human.
No, thanks. I do it because I'm surrounded by the same people. I'm as strong as my team. So I am lucky. You are part of that. So thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask you, if you were going to share one thing for people to take away today, what would that be?
I think walk through the door of fear. If fear is present, that's not something to be fearful of. That's something to be excited. Go through it, face it, stand it. And if that means standing alone, you stand alone, because I promise you someone is watching. Someone will come and someone will do the same thing. They will learn through you and through your actions. But I think being brave in creating a space where you're safe to be authentic and bring genuine, practical, legit, things to the table. Real. Be practical, but be real, but be honest and authentic. I think that is, the world will shut you down, but you can just stand back up and keep standing up until you have people stand with you. Eventually, they join you. And I've been lucky and blessed enough to have that happen. So fear is usually my trigger to say, keep going. You're exactly where you need to be, and you just keep going. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Nikki. And it's been such a joy to, have this conversation with you. For anybody who actually wants to reach out to Nikki to join her at that new table, then the details will actually be available to you as part of this post once we go live. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. No worries.
This was Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. Stay awake, lead with heart, be bold enough to listen deeply. I'm Cathy Dimarchos. Until next time, be the impact.